Hello, I am Paul Motz, Director of the Westland Youth Assistance Program. Thank you for joining us today for an episode of Youth Matters. We're going to hear about some different ways to help young people today. We have a special guest with us. Her name is Jennifer Spitler. She is President and CEO of Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Southeast Michigan. Jennifer, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
You know, the sun's out today. So in Michigan in February, I'll take that as a win.
Perfect. So before we get into learning so much about Big Brothers, Big Sisters, can we hear a little bit about you? How did you end up where you are?
Yeah. Well, I am a transplant from that state to the south of us. And so I came from Ohio. I went to Eastern, and I did both of my degrees there. I'm a social worker by trade. So did my undergrad and my master's degree, and just kind of fell in love with Michigan, Southeast Michigan. I had 3 cousins who came to Eastern at about the same time. And so they've landed in different spots. One of them lived in Westland for a while. So I know this area pretty well. One lives in Allen Park and one lives in Farmington. So, you know, we do the Southeast Michigan thing as we call ourselves the Soliday Girls. That's my mother's maiden name. So we're the Soliday Girls, take over Southeast Michigan. But came to Big Brothers, Big Sisters through really that network of social capital that you build after a time. I've been here for almost 23 years this year, but it's a friend. Just like I've gotten many other jobs, as a friend recommends you to a thing. And so I had another girlfriend that I went to undergrad with who was working at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and she said, really think this would be your work. After I moved back here for my master's degree, I did go home for a few years. So have been here ever since, and I just feel connected to Southeast Michigan, our sports teams. I'm a sports girl.
Well, I'm glad you were able to move to Michigan and enjoy Michigan as opposed to that other state south of the border there. So, so welcome. And
Thank you.
So a lot about Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Yeah.
So when did it start? It's been around forever.
It has. 1904 was the first kind of iteration, and it kind of came about. There was a judge in New York City that was finding young people in his courtroom, and they were unaccompanied or didn't have the supports that they needed. And he started engaging his friends and others in the community to spend time with these young men specifically, and kind of just it started organically. There were also some other Big Brothers, Big Sisters Big Sisters concepts popping up in Cincinnati and some other places. And then it wasn't until I think I want to say it was the 70s, maybe the 80s, where it came together as Big Brothers, Big Sisters. There was a Big Brothers, there was a Big Sisters, and then it kind of came together. There's a Canadian version, or, you know, their own affiliation there. But we have about 230 organizations across the country serving young people in all 50 states.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And to think it was a judge who wanted to help support young people, like, hey, you don't have anybody with you today?
Yeah.
Like, who's looking after you?
Exactly.
So that's a neat way. So what is the mission of Big Brothers, Big Sisters?
Our mission is really about that one-to-one volunteer, mentee relationship. So our vision is that all youth achieve their potential, but our mission is really rooted in that one-to-one mentoring relationship. So we provide a volunteer that gets together with their we call them bigs and littles, once a couple of times a month, and it depends on their relationship and how they work it out. For our community-based program, sometimes they're connecting on the phone or through text. In between those, every other week outings. In our school-based program, it's every other week at a school site. So there are different, ways to be involved, but really it's about that one-to-one relationship.
Okay. And you wanted to come out to Westland. You said Westland's important. Has there been a bigger need or request for mentors from the Westland area?
Well, what I would say really about Westland, and I would say this, this is about the 270, I call it the 275 corridor. So my history with Big Brothers Big Sisters has been mostly with the Washtenaw County Agency. I've been there for almost 23 years. It was in 2023 that Metro Detroit Agency and the Washtenaw County Agency merged to create the 4-county footprint that we currently are serving. And what was happening pre-merge, or at least kind of the conversations that we were having, was Washtenaw County ended at right the county line. We weren't moving into Wayne County. And the Metro Detroit Agency was really serving kind of the 75 corridor, Detroit, Southfield, Pontiac, in that area. And felt like there was this missing space where we'd have families that would inquire, or volunteers that would inquire and be interested, but we just didn't have presence, right? As much presence in that corridor. And we know that there's kids that could be served, and we know that there's volunteers that could serve them. And so one of the goals of the merge was to, bridge that gap, to be able to serve and kind of focus on some of the area in between Detroit and Ypsi.
Right. So you're really trying to focus on building up Western Wayne County.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, wonderful. So, would you like to talk about the bigs first or the littles first?
I love them equally. So we'll start with the littles.
All right.
Yeah. So our littles are between the ages of 7 and 18. So you can enroll in the program at 7, we'll match you at 8, and you can stay in the program until you're 18. We won't match a little after they turn 16, because our goal is that they have at least a year or more together in that relationship. One of the things that research shows is that anything less than 6 months is actually more detrimental, but a year is really where you start to see that kind of long-term impact. And so our goal is that our matches last at least a year or more. And our current average match length in our community-based program is a little over 2 years for a match relationship to be together. So we really kind of want that longevity. So we have kids that come to us from a variety of situations, household circumstances. We will enroll anyone who wants and needs a mentor that is within that age group and that lives in our 4-county footprint. That is the only criteria to be enrolled in Big Brothers Big Sisters as a young person, because we know that kids come from all kinds of circumstances and could really use someone to kind of walk that path with them and be a support to them. Not every kid has kind of those built-in social network, social capital within their family or their school system. And so being able to support that and provide that, it can look very different for different families. But yeah, we have very open enrollment process.
Okay. And what are the four counties?
Washtenaw, Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb.
Okay, so
Yep.
that's a lot of people in a big area. What's that? Over 3 million people?
4.2.
4.2 million.
At least the last census that I looked at. That's our yeah.
So let's say I'm a parent of a 10-year-old who's kind of shy, might not have like a lot of friends or a lot of school connections because we've moved around a lot. Is like that parent, they're going to reach out to you via phone or website? How do they go about
Both things, either thing. You can go to our website or you could give us a call and we'll start the enrollment process. The first piece is an orientation so that you understand what Big Brothers Big Sisters is. Parents are a really important element, especially in our community-based program, because if it's a younger little, right, the parents are doing a lot of the communicating with the big for the outings. If it's a little older little, sometimes, they kind of manage that relationship a little bit more. But one of the things that we do after matching a young person is what's called match support. So we check in every month with the family and the little and with the volunteer to ensure child safety, relationship development, help them with any resources and that kind of thing. So parents are it's so important to that relationship being successful. So we have a short orientation, we do it video, Zoom world. And then we start the interview process where we do interview the youth and the parent to get a sense of where are you coming from? What's your background? What are your goals? What are your challenges? What are the things that you would want in a relationship? What are the things you're interested in? We try to make matches that make sense. So, and do our due diligence in that. We don't just take the next kid on the list and the next volunteer that comes through and match them together. So getting a sense of where a family and a young person are kind of coming from helps us, I think, make better matches. And so we go through that process with all of our families.
And you've also probably seen this before. Like, is there an age limit on a mentor? Do you say, nope, you're too old, I don't want you to be a volunteer mentor?
We don't. But what I'll say is that preferences are also a big part of what we do, right? When we say we're interviewing families and volunteers, we're also getting a sense of what their preferences are. Many kids want a college age student, right? Like they want a college age or young professional. They want someone hip. They think I'm too old. I'm like, I'm not, you guys don't get it. But that's okay, I understand. But one of the things I've seen in my time at Big Brothers Big Sisters is even though that might be kind of their initial preference, especially in families that have multiple kids, we'll see like they might have one relationship that lasts a year or two, right? And then, well, maybe a little older volunteer this time. They're a little more rooted in the community, maybe a little less likely to move, a little less, have understand the community and can open up access to some opportunities that maybe a younger volunteer couldn't. And so sometimes that age request or preference shifts a little bit for young people and their parents. But we don't, have a cap on the age of our volunteers. No.
Good, because I've seen some young people really hit it off with somebody who might be older and are able to just develop a great relationship that they're able to share and connect with someone. And, a lot of times they're very reliable.
They're reliable. That's another. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and they've, a lot of times they've experienced a lot of life.
Sure.
And are able to be more patient with things.
I think all of those things are true, yes.
So, all right, so those are about the littles, and it's for obviously boys and girls. Mm-hmm. Age 7 is when you can apply, but you wouldn't get matched till age 8. The program goes all the way up till you're age 18, but you don't want to match anyone after the age of 16. Yeah. So it's about getting in kind of early. So can we hear about some success stories before we get into the bigs?
Yes. Well, success stories are my favorite thing, right? I have the privilege, I think, of being here for that period of time where I've seen kids grow up. I've seen these relationships grow and bloom and blossom outside of, us and our involvement in the program. One of the first bigs and littles that was on my caseload when I started as a match support specialist was Greg and Chris, and they've stayed engaged in the organization in different ways. Greg's been on the board, but Chris is now working. He's a father. He, is in the Guard and just really kind of committed to his life, and they still connect. And every time they get together, I get a picture of Chris and his baby and Greg. But I think that, Chris enrolled when he was 6. We enrolled kids at 6 at that point, and they were matched not long after. And he was being raised by his grandma and had kind of intermittent interaction with his, biological parents, and just having a consistent person in his life that he could just always turn to besides his grandma to what should I do, or how do I do, or, even it's one of those things I find when a big and a little are together, or when relationships develop, is it's sometimes not what's said, right? Like it's just the unsaid presence of this person there knowing. Like, I don't know that Greg and Chris could say to me, like, there was a pivotal moment, right, that I asked him this question, or that for Chris, I think it's just that Greg walked with him through that path. We just closed a match that had been together, I think, for 13 years. The little turned 18, graduated from high school, and they were just so, I'm going to say, intertwined in each other's life. Again, just kind of situation at home, some mom stuff, some dad stuff. And, what that does, I think, to a young person just creates a little bit of instability, a little bit of self-consciousness, a little bit of like, where do I fit in the world? Especially, right, when parents have gone through a divorce or are, not, maybe not co-parenting. And so having an outside person, and I think that's what Laura really was for her, was the person who could just help her navigate some of those paths.
So, just back to Chris, right? For the little, so this is where I give, grandma a lot of credit too, because that was somebody who's like, I want to take an opportunity to help him the best that I can help. So I'm grandma to a 6-year-old, so let's see what big brothers, big sisters can do. And you never know until you try. So that's like an ultimate about grandma. And then hearing Chris, kind of grow up, graduate, sounds like he joined the National Guard, has a child of his own now, and they still keep in contact. Those are some of my favorite stories with mentors and kids where they're like, yep, my former mentee's 30 years old, because with our program, we have our advisory board, and we have a lot of former mentors and current mentors that serve, and just knowing some of their history and their connections. And yep, the mentoring is for the young person, but it can be so rewarding, as the mentor. So you want to talk about becoming a big.
I do. You said something I want to just touch on, though. I think that is one of the things in my time here is when a parent or a grandparent reaches out, like it always humbles me, right? That they would reach out, and it takes a lot, I think, of courage sometimes to do that. Like, I can't do everything. I can't be everyone to this young person. They could use more support. And I think that it takes a lot sometimes for parents or grandparents to reach out and do that. And so I'm always, it's one of the things that I think makes it so special, is that, they're a part of it, but they also are welcoming this person into their family in some way, shape, or form. So our bigs in our community-based program are all 18 and over. We do have high school bigs in our school-based program. So we have 2 programs, community and school. Community is what I think, a lot of people would think of when you think of big brothers, big sisters. You've got a big that goes and picks a little up at their home on the weekends or on the evenings. They go to ice cream, they go to the library, they go to ball game, kind of whatever it is that is on their schedule of activities to do. In the school-based program, you go to the school every other week. It's a site. It's the same time. There's a little bit more consistency to it, which can make it easier for some folks in their lives, right? Like, I'm going to go on Tuesdays at noon or, that kind of thing. But we do have high schoolers that also serve younger kids in our school-based program. But for community-based, which is where we have our biggest wait list, and that we're always recruiting volunteers for, it is, the volunteer and the parent or the child figuring out what makes sense for them to do on their outings. We encourage that we use this acronym REACH. We encourage that they have a well-rounded experience, that they do things that are recreational, educational, right? Art and culture, community service, and health and wellness. And so not only do, thinking about what they do together, but we provide a variety of activities and events that fall in that scope too. And just trying to make it well-rounded so that kids are experiencing or exposed to things that maybe they otherwise wouldn't be. And that's really, I think, one of the greatest benefits of having a mentor, especially in the community-based program, is, it's someone who, maybe is going to take you to the festival this weekend. And maybe that's not something that your family ever thought of going to, but this is an interest that the big and the little have created together to learn something new. We have lots of what I call positive risk taking.
All right.
That happens in those relationships, right? The first time, the trying the new thing, having somebody next to you that gives you kind of the encouragement. We did informal research, couple of years ago, that was really around what was the most significant impact. And so we asked each, the big, the little, and the parent, what has been the most significant change that you've seen in yourself or the little in your time together? And we asked it around our buckets of outcomes, which are self-confidence, risky behaviors, and academic success. Those are kind of our broad impact areas. And what that told us at the end was risky behaviors. Making positive risks, taking positive risks was what littles get the most out of the program. Trying out for that team, trying out for student council, trying out for the play, trying a new food, exposure to a new culture, like all of those things that like maybe they wouldn't do on their own, but because they've got this person and this exposure and that opportunity to try it.
Sure, sometimes that little bit of a nudge, or sometimes when you're able to learn more about yourself with your big, and they're introducing some things you might not have considered about yourself. So that is seeing kids take the next step. So that's a big thing that we always try to encourage young people to do. Risks aren't all bad, and that's one of the key points for you guys. But your acronym REACH, that sounds amazing though, but like there's really good stuff in there. So recreation, doing some things you maybe might not typically do. The H was the health, and what C was culture.
Community service.
So the young person who's getting is also giving.
Absolutely.
And we all know giving is a really good thing.
It's an important, full circle, right? These are important elements for us to be healthy, well adapted, people, humans, right? To be engaged in your community and to be out there doing things. And I always think about the more that a young person can be out and about and learning not only about themselves and their community and kind of the world around them, they're going to engage. Right? They're going to become engaged and not necessarily, I hate to use the word apathetic, but, they're just going to be more engaged citizens and community members as they grow because they've benefited from something, but then they've also been exposed and watched someone else give of their time and energy to them.
Exactly. And so there's a process to becoming a big.
Yes.
You just don't wake up one day and say, I want a big. Next week you're matched with the kid. Good luck.
Yeah.
So let's hear about this process.
It is our priority is always child safety. So we're putting a volunteer and a child together in the community, unsupervised, right? And so ensuring that we bring the right people through the door and that we do that work intentionally to support the matches is really important to us. So we do have a background check process, a reference check process. We interview the volunteers similarly to the way we interview families to get a sense of where they came from, what are they interested in, what are their motivations, and that kind of thing to, again, make good matches. But I say all of those things to also say life experience coming through the door is really important. Just because we do background checks and references doesn't mean that you have to be perfect to be a mentor. And I think that's a misconception sometimes, is I have to be, 100% upstanding. I can't have anything in my history. Of course, there are things that you can't have in your history. We're not going to match you with a child. But we know that people who have lived the same experiences as some of our kids can be really good mentors to them. Especially, I always say, I think the reason I do this work is because I was really fortunate to, in my teens and early 20s, have people who directed and then redirected and then redirected and then redirected me, because I had a tough teen years. I was not a perfect child. I gave my mother a lot of grief. So having people who could help do that, and having volunteers who've maybe been through and made some poor choices, but have learned from those choices, right? I think that that's a really important element of being there for young people. They you know, if you've been through it, they might listen to you a little bit more sometimes when you're giving them the advice than, you know, you haven't had this experience. Doesn't mean that they won't, but I think that that's one of the, in my mind, misconceptions is like you have to be perfect. We do this process because it's important that we weed out those that might be harmful to young people, but we want to weed in the people who can be beneficial to them. And so we do go through that process. And then we make matches, and then we check in on the matches. Like I said earlier, those monthly match support calls, coming to group events and activities, that help us continue to ensure child safety, and that the relationship is, you know, going in a positive direction.
So, and we spoke earlier before the show, and just how important mentoring is to so many people. And you really hit on, you know, that really great quote that you don't have to be a perfect person to be a perfect mentor.
Yeah.
So that's key for a lot. Yeah. Now, how about kind of preparing the mentors? Is there some training or?
Yep, we do training. We're very lucky because we are a part of a national organization, so we have a training platform that we utilize some of those trainings. We also add to it, but we do have volunteers kind of go through this is relationship development and what it can look like at Big Brothers Big Sisters. They do a trauma-informed care training. They do a training around JEDI, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, because many times we're cross race, cross gender, cross religion, cross socioeconomic status, like matching. And so just giving people that sense of how do you learn from and open up and do those things with someone who maybe doesn't come from the same background as you. And then we have them also do a youth developmental stages training. And so there's quite a bit of, it's about 6 hours of training before you're matched with a little.
Sure.
That's required. And then we provide ongoing opportunities, whether it's, you know, communication, or whether it's, you know, more kind of development, or how to deal with some tough conversations with kids, because that comes up, especially I think as they age, right? If you're matched with an 11-year-old and then they're a 14-year-old 3 years later, it's a different ball game. So it's not only those regular check-ins where they get individual kind of coaching and training access to our staff and our platforms, but we do some topics that we see, right, that kind of happen regularly, and we add those to the mix.
Now, did you mention like a monthly thing where you bring your different bigs and littles together?
Well, we do many monthly.
Okay, I
our
want to hear
goal
about
is
this.
About 4. Well, we have, right, like we have a pretty broad footprint. And so we try to have group events or activities and outings all throughout that area that create the opportunity for the community-based program, for the volunteer to not have to think too much about what they're doing this weekend, for us to pay for it, right? To have this sponsored event or activity. And so we do things in partnership with other organizations. Last year we did some really cool things. We went to a construction site and the kids got to learn about like all the different professions, right? It's from the architect to the electrician to the, you know, all the things that are happening in rebuilding this site. We had a group come in and do a really cool STEM activity around building, I thought this was so funny, derby race cars with mouse traps, right? I think it's physics, right? The momentum of whatever it has. I feel like I would have been in a physics class. We have the Ladies League of Detroit does an event every year that is etiquette and self-esteem for young girls. So we have 4, 5, 3, 6, it depends on the month, activities throughout the community that are bigs and littles, and our parents and or waitlist littles can also attend to engage them in activities and positive youth development, even though they're not kind of matched one-to-one yet. We try to give them opportunities to feel supported, encouraged,
because
through group activities.
And that's really important, because usually, you know, through our mentoring program, one of the tough parts, because we'll do like a 16-hour training. So you as a volunteer, you build a camaraderie with the other people going through the training and the connections and learning and sharing about like listening and so many other things. Then it's like training's over, get in there, and then it's like I'm kind of isolated, and you got our staff to reach out to, but I think that's a piece that's missing or can be improved in our programs is more things together, like the other volunteers and mentors.
It's a lot.
But
It can be a lot, but I do agree. Like it's an important element of well, and then you have bigs for us because the training happens virtual as opposed to kind of the way it happens for y'all. Like the bigs don't get that on the front end. So this is the opportunity for them to meet other bigs, and then that's where like. Then you have groups of people that are going bowling together next week, or you know what I mean? Because the kids get along, the bigs get along, and so they'll do some of those activities together as a group, just to have more. I think it's a really important piece too of the bigs being able to see their little interact socially with their peers. Because I think, right, like if you think about not only the education learning loss that happened during COVID, but the social emotional learning loss that happened, kids not knowing how to interact with other kids, not knowing how to not do this thing with their thumbs and their head looking down. I think that bigs and littles being in space with each other gives the big opportunity to help them navigate peer relationships as well.
You hit on so many key pieces right there. Pandemic was a kick in the chest and put so many things on, halt, and then people were kind of slow to get going again. But when we had kids out of school, not in person for nearly a year, that's a lot of time lost, significant time for a young person. So let's say I kind of want to ease in to being a big, but like I want to help. So is there some different things that I can do without committing to being a big to still help your organization?
Sure. Well, you can be a big for a day. We have a program called Big Neighbors. And so that's the idea of like our neighbors and our community supporting program without being a big. So as a big neighbor, you could be a big for a day. So maybe we have a group event or outing that we want to invite our waitlist kids to. So you could come out and hang out with them for part of that day. It's obviously supervised and it's in a closed setting because these are volunteers that are not vetted as bigs necessarily, but you can do things like that. Those group events that we were talking about, I think that those are things that, like, if you have a company or an organization or a church group that you're a part of that could provide one of those group outings or group experiences for kids, that's a great way to see the program and kind of get a sense of bigs and littles without you being a big yourself. Maybe once you see it, then you're like, oh, I'm ready to, that doesn't look so hard. Let me take dip my toe in and do this. You can work at some of our fundraising events. You can, help spread the word on social media. There's all kinds of things you can do to really support the mission and the organization. But there's, kind of a couple of things that as a big neighbor, you can actually kind of engage with the kids and the bigs, before taking that step and kind of committing leap. And when I say committing, like we said, that I want to say another thing about that. We do ask for a year commitment, right? And I did say that we have about an average a little over 2 years. And then I told stories about matches that have been together for 12, 18, 20 years. I also like to remind folks that you all had a teacher, you all had a coach, and we've had many bigs that have been in the lives of a young person for a year or two and have a lasting impact on where they are. You don't have to commit to this person being in your life forever before you take that leap. And I think that's something too that might be a little bit of one of those misgivings that people are like, well, do this person forever? I had a little reach out to me when he went to Eastern, it was probably 10 years ago at this point. And I'm connected with him on LinkedIn. Noah. He reached out to me and said, sorry, I'm looking up because I'm just thinking about him as a little person. He had been in the program and he said, I wanted to reconnect with my big. I wanted to thank them because it was a really kind of I think his parents were going through a divorce. There was some tough stuff going on at home. How impactful it was that this person was in his life during that time. And when I went back and looked up their match support notes, they had only been matched for about a year and a half. And I was like, dang, right? Like I was reminded of that really, walking a path with a kid during transitions can be just so impactful for their entire life.
So, and it's like a little different for us in our program, because if it's easier to get a commitment from an adult for, hey, this is going to be 6 months to a year. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you're telling a 14-year-old, well, it's for a year, that's forever to them. And like, it's like, well, what if I don't like it? Well, you got to give it a try. But so, and that's one of the things that we can consistently see. The longer the match, it's not just, okay, things are going good, let's stop. You want it to continue past that and continue to build. And sometimes it becomes more of a check-in, and you got this person, to be a go-to. So what are you looking for out of Westland? What could Westland, the city of Westland, do to be of help to you?
Well, I think that, like I said, I feel like we haven't pre-merge, had a presence, right, in this area of we're here to support kids. We're here. I know that many times, and I don't know if I've seen this over years, is as a Big Brothers Big Sisters organization, we do have name recognition, right? We do have people that come to us from they saw a commercial or they saw whatever. But if we don't have kids and volunteers in this area, but we do have those that could benefit from the program, we want to serve if we can, or we want to provide actually connection and partnership to other organizations that are serving in different ways as well. Maybe if we have kids on the wait list here and we don't have a lot of volunteers, the more connected we are with your program or with other services in Westland, we can help get them something that they need, because people do come to us many times for that, I need something for them to do. But I feel like it's been a little bit of, like I said, that corridor has been a little bit of no man's land for us, where the more we're in the community and we're connecting with folks like you and different organizations, learning about what's here, but also developing our own presence, we can help make some of those connections outside of just being a big or being a little, but making sure that people get where they need to get the support that they need. Because it might not be our program that's a fit for them.
So I'm going to take this as a yes, that you want to work together with the Westland Youth Assistance Program. Sure. And we're going to come up with some things. How about right after today's meeting, I'll bring you down to my office and we can start talking and maybe planning some things.
Yeah, I'd love it.
Any last information that you'd like to see covered or you'd like to bring up for our guests at home?
I think it's that thing of, fill your cup, right? And I know it feels like when you're thinking about being thinking about being a mentor, that you think you're filling someone else's cup. But what I'm going to tell folks is that your cup's being filled, right? I think that it's really important. One of the things recently, the last couple of years that have come out, where the Surgeon General's talked a lot about the epidemic of loneliness and connection and loss of connection, definitely came from the pandemic. But I think before that, right, we saw, I have kids, right, that I had to say, just because somebody's your friend on Facebook doesn't mean they're your friend. That is not the definition of friend. That might be acquaintance. That might be, people aren't connected in the same way that we used to be connected. And it takes, I think, sometimes more to fill our cups. Right? And connection's a great way to fill your cup. So if you're someone who just wants connection as an adult, right, to your community, to people, to learning and growing, this is a great program to have your cup filled as an adult as well. I think that that's an important element that folks don't always think about, because we're giving and we're doing for young people. But relationships are two-way streets, right?
Exactly.
These are relationships. The kids fill your cup, I think, as much as volunteers fill the kids' cups.
So there's always good stories, and you know, some of my favorites was when we've had kids go through our program, and then they want to come back. Sometimes they went to school for social work or psychology, so they want an internship or to volunteer. But sometimes when you see them like repeating what they benefited from, because they knew how important it was to them, and they wanted to give. And it's consistent about our mentors, because you continue to learn about yourself too.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And so we're always growing. So Jennifer, thank you so much. And I appreciate what Big Brothers Big Sisters of Southeast Michigan does. It's a lot of area and a lot of people and a lot of responsibility, but a lot of good things are happening because of it, and you just want it more and better. And so let's try to hope for that. And so, you know, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Youth Matters. I obviously want to thank our guest who shared so much awesome information, but I'd also like to thank our viewers at home and WLND for making this happen. So thank you very much and have a great day.